Hi, my name is Brandon from Live Production Mastery, and today I want to talk about a question I get asked about all the time, and that's hybrid events, and specifically some of the myths that surround them. We've all seen the term hybrid event thrown around a lot lately, but what does it really mean? A lot of people seem to think that a hybrid event is simply taking an in-person event and streaming it online, but that is not the case. A true hybrid event is when there is a two-way communication happening between a person or people at the physical location of the event and then a person or group of people remotely participating in the event. This could be a virtual audience member being displayed on some screens to ask a question, or a remote presenter presenting from their house or office. It's like how a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. Most hybrid events include streaming as one of its features, but not all events that are streamed or televised would be considered a hybrid event. For example, most people would not consider an NFL game to be a hybrid event. It's an in-person event that is streamed live to an online or remote audience, but it's not hybrid because someone watching at home really can't participate in the event itself. But what's next? The future of hybrid events is immersive events. With the technology we have today, we can create completely virtual events that are even better than in-person events. With VR and AR, we can create an immersive experience where you can connect with people at your table, both virtually and in person. To give you an idea what different types of events might look like, here are some examples. A strictly in-person event would be a conference where all attendees are physically present in the same location. A fully virtual event would be a webinar where all attendees are participating online, but there is no physical component. A live stream event would be a concert where there is a performance taking place in front of a live audience, but is also being streamed online for remote viewers. A hybrid event would be a combination of all the above, with a physical and virtual component, such as a conference where some attendees are physically present and some are participating remotely. But let's bust some myths about hybrid events. Many people think that a hybrid event is easy to execute or somehow cheaper or better than a strictly physical or virtual event. But that's not actually the case. In fact, streaming an event may cause less people to show up in person because they have the option to stay at home, which ultimately leads to less interaction in the physical event, and the virtual audience tends not to care as much about the content or whatever's being said. Additionally, hybrid events can be more complex and costly to produce than traditional in-person or virtual events. It requires a different set of technical skills and equipment to pull off effectively. And it also requires a different approach to the engagement and interaction. For example, in a hybrid event, you're actually playing to at least 2 different audiences and sometimes even more. You have the in-person audience, and they want to see a nice stage with a backdrop. They want to see screens on the side or something like that. They want to have content on the screens line up or match with what the person's saying in person. Plus, you're going to want to have food and a decent atmosphere in the room. So there's a lot you need to plan just for the in-person audience. And then for the online audience, you still want to be able to have a wide shot, a tight shot, so you can follow the speaker on stage. So now you're adding a cameraman to the mix. Plus, you need to have usually a picture-in-picture or a super source or something where they can see the person talking and the content to back up what that person's saying. A lot of times we're adding in things like lower thirds and other graphics that we don't tend to think about when we're strictly doing an in-person event. And then if you're doing a legit hybrid event, you probably have an online talent or at least people asking questions that you're remoting in, so you need to play to them as an audience member too. Sometimes this means a 3rd or 4th camera on stage pointing back at the audience so whoever's presenting can see the audience and not just the back of their heads. Another myth is that a hybrid event is the same as a virtual event, but now with a live audience. But if we discussed, a true hybrid event involves a two-way communication between physical and virtual attendees. And that two-way communication is not the easiest thing to execute. Usually there are speakers in the room that are outputting the vocals of the microphones on stage. That itself could potentially have a feedback loop. Now you're going to add mics in the audience for Q&A, and if anyone is watching or even participating from their seats in through a Zoom call or something like that, they have their mic open, now you're open to a feedback loop. If you're trying to bring in a virtual talent for them to present on stage, you need to push microphones to them. If you push their microphone back to them, you have another feedback loop there. So there's a lot to manage when you're talking about a truly hybrid event. You want to make sure you don't run into any technical difficulties. Again, you have video loops, you have feedback loops, you have the experience of the virtual talent coming in and the experience of any virtual audience members asking a question. On top of all that, you want to produce a good live stream and a good experience for the in-person audience. That's a lot to manage. And now with hybrid events out of the way, now let's talk about what I'm excited for, which is immersive events. Immersive events can be fully virtual, but the difference is using AR or VR, the audience would be able to interact in a way that is similar to being in person, like meeting with each other while walking around to different booths in a convention hall, or sitting at the same table during the presentation, or doing a group work as part of the conference. Immersive events could still have a physical and virtual audience, but the two audiences would get to interact with each other by having each table outfitted with at least one virtual attendee with two-way communication, or a part of the convention hall with a giant video wall where the physical attendees can see the virtual attendees and can interact with each other. The online immersive experience might even be better than the in-person experience, or they can both have their pros and cons. That's one of the things here at Live Production Mastery we specialize in, creating immersive events that are engaging and interactive for all attendees, whether they're physically present or participating remotely. So thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our channel for more information on production and event planning, and for more myth busting on hybrid and immersive events. Thanks for watching. I said thanks for watching twice, but that was good, right? Short, to the point, it flowed nicely, but I didn't write it. I actually asked ChatGPT to write it for me. I gave it some prompts, I helped it out a little, kind of decided where I wanted the whole conversation to go, but it popped out a script for me, I threw it into a teleprompter, and I read it to camera. That was it. I mean, it impressed me a lot. It even gave me time markers of when to put B-roll in and when to put something else in, when to cut back to camera and a tight shot, etc. So I was very impressed with it. But after I shot the whole thing, I felt like I was missing some key pieces of information, some enthusiasm. You can only go so far after just, reading word for word off of a script. So then I decided to do a little experiment. I just recorded ChatGPT's version of the video, and then I decided to record my own version, where I would use ideas, but I wouldn't read off a teleprompter. I wouldn't even have notes. I kind of just went off the top of my head and see what came up, and that's how I've done most of my videos in the past. So now I'm letting you decide, which one do you like better? Do you like the concise ChatGPT export from AI, or are you gonna want Brandon rant about whatever topic that pops up into his head and see what comes from that? So let's take a look. Hey everyone, I'm Brandon from Live Production Mastery, and today I wanted to go over hybrid events and what everyone is screwing up about them. Let's start off with the definition of a hybrid event. It is not simply streaming an in-person event. You would not call the NFL, any NFL game, a hybrid event, right? That is an in-person event. It's a game played at a stadium and then televised or live streamed for a virtual audience. It's not a hybrid event. A hybrid event is when you bring in a virtual audience or you bring in virtual talent and have a two-way communication with them. For instance, if you're doing a conference and you want to have your virtual audience ask a question, they could simply chat and have a person in the room ask the question from the chat, or you could bring that person up on screen so everyone can see them and they could ask the question to the talent themselves. That would be considered a hybrid event because there's a two-way communication happening. The online audience can actually ask the question themselves and then hear and see the answer from the onstage talent. And vice versa. If you're having a remote talent come into your conference because they can't travel or limited time, whatever the reason may be, having a remote talent come into the conference, you can see them on screen, they can do a screen share, or pushing the screen share for them, whatever the case may be, having that two-way communication where the virtual talent can see the actual in-person physical and or virtual audience, and then everyone else can see and talk to back and forth that virtual talent. That is true two-way communication. And there's a bunch of platforms you can use to do two-way communication for something large like a conference. You can use Zoom, obviously everyone knows about that. Microsoft Teams, you can go to other platforms you wouldn't necessarily think of like Vimeo. Vimeo now has a way to do two-way communication, and there are so many other platforms, but I'm not gonna get into all of them. I'm here to focus on actual hybrid events. So when we're planning an event with a client, they're always gonna say, hey, yeah, we wanna do some sort of hybrid or live streamed event. Internally, we use a certain set of words to describe each type of event. We have strictly in-person, meaning there's no online or virtual component. We then have strictly virtual, where the whole thing is happening online, usually bringing guests in through Zoom, switching a show, and sending it out to somewhere like Vimeo. Then we have an in-person event with a live stream, or a one-way live stream, as we like to call it. That is, we have an in-person event, we're gonna set up some cameras, and we're gonna stream it out to Zoom Webinar, or Vimeo, or some sort of platform. And if someone wants to ask questions or type something in the chat, we're gonna have a member from the client's team be monitoring the chat, and then give them a microphone in the physical space, and they can raise their hand and ask a question. That's gonna go through the audio mixer and into the live stream, so everyone online can also hear that question being asked. A lot of times we might have at least 2 or 3 cameras for that conference, so that way we can show off the audience in the room, we can do a wide shot and a tight shot to give the virtual audience some perspective as to what's going on at any given time. And then finally, we have a truly hybrid event, and that means that we're gonna have some sort of remote talent coming in to present. We might have remote or virtual audiences coming in and doing an interaction. That could be interactions at specific tables. That could be interactions where we put them on screen to ask questions, two-way dialogue between talent and audience, or audience and audience for that member. There are so many options when it comes to truly hybrid, but that also leads to a lot of complicated factors, which is why we are so specific in how we internally differentiate between them. When we do a truly hybrid event, there's a lot of things we need to think about and add to the list of stuff that we bring. We need to bring the ability to handle a mix minus or multiple mix minuses when we're doing virtual talent and things like that. We want to make sure the talent can hear the audience members but not hear themselves. We want to make sure the audience in the room can hear the talent and the virtual talent and sometimes the virtual audience. And we want to make sure the virtual audience can hear the virtual talent and the in-person talent and audience. So there's a couple different mixes and mix minuses going to a couple different locations. You want a larger audio board, maybe even a digital audio board to be able to handle something like this, and then enough audio capture cards to your different destinations so you can send these mixes to their correct destination. On top of handling audio, which as we know is the most important part of video, then you actually have to handle all your video routing as well. You could have multiple feeds coming from virtual talent. They could be doing a screen share as well as showing their face, and you don't want it to just look like a giant Zoom call up on screen, because that doesn't look nearly as professional as doing a true picture-in-picture where you're not going to see any of the Zoom overlays or the pinned windows or any sort of pop-up messages and things like that. Then you have to worry about what you're sending where. When we have in-person talent, we don't necessarily need to do something called IMAG, image magnification, where we put their video feed up on screen. When we do this, we make sure to use something like a hardware switcher so we get very little delay. So when you move your hand on stage, it doesn't move 2 seconds later up on screen for everyone to see. But when we're not doing IMAG, we usually have holding slides or a PowerPoint or some sort of graphic up on the screens while the onstage talent is speaking. Then if we have virtual talent, we want to make sure we do a picture-in-picture for the person speaking and their PowerPoint being shown on both screens, maybe one on each screen. If we're doing a weird shape like a video wall, we can do a really wide where person's in the middle and then the screens are on the outside with their PowerPoint, their screen share, whatever the case may be. But for the virtual audience, they might not be seeing any sort of stage. It might be a simple picture-in-picture with the virtual person talking and their PowerPoint, or it might be a physical person talking and we're showing a tight shot of them and then the PowerPoint on the side. And occasionally you switch to a wide shot when there's a Q&A question. We might flip to a third or fourth camera facing the audience to show that person speaking when they're asking a Q&A question. Whatever the case may be, we're playing to a lot of different audiences, which means we might be sending one thing to this destination, a different image to this destination, and then a different image to our live audience, and making sure we are creating a good-looking image and experience for our in-person audience with a nice stage, a backdrop, lighting, etc. So what's the next step after hybrid events, or what else can we add on to hybrid events? Well, that leads us into immersive events. That could be something as simple as doing a large video wall or projection map screen, putting a bunch of the virtual audience up there and letting the physical audience see them and vice versa, right? Letting the virtual audience see more of the physical audience, preferably having them be able to two-way communicate and have individual conversations. Picture this. At each table at a conference, there's one virtual participant at that table. And maybe you can elevate the experience by having that virtual participant be able to use their screen that people are seeing them on as a display. And there's microphones on the table so they can two-way communicate, right? They can hear what's happening. You might be able to bring in multiple people. You're capturing all of that content and dialogue happening at those tables, and you might be able to use those for playback or some other experience later in the conference. Another way you can handle immersive events is with AR or VR, right? In virtual reality or augmented reality, I might be able to see the person sitting there next to me, even though he's not really there. Might be virtual, might be at his house, might be at a different location at a different conference, but both conferences are combining for this one special guest, whatever that may be. So VR and AR are going to allow so many capabilities when it comes to immersive events in terms of the environment that you can be in, who you're going to be interacting with, actually interacting with everyone and not just watching them do their own interactions. So AR and VR are going to be a huge part of immersive events. But how do we bring that to the real world today? Well, maybe you're doing a big convention hall with a lot of different booths, right? Why don't we have a large video wall with the virtual audience displayed on that video wall? And now we could have multiple cameras, multiple microphones set up so audience members or people around the convention hall, even people from the booths, can go up to those cameras and microphones and interact with the people on the video wall. Could be sectioned off for different mics, go to different groups of people, different breakout rooms, whatever you may see fit. The goal is to up the amount of interaction that's happening so the virtual audience isn't being left out of what typically the in-person audience gets a lot of. Everyone knows that networking is a big deal when you go to these conferences. Some people like it, some people hate it. The truth is your network is your most valuable asset. So people do want to network, they just don't want to spend the time it takes to network. Well, that's where VR and AR can come into play. You don't have to fly across the country just to network. You could say, you know what, I want to go to this conference and I might meet someone cool that is doing the same sort of thing I'm doing. They could help me business-wise. I could help them business-wise. We could become business partners. So networking is going to be a huge way the VR and AR community can come together. And a lot of people are using AR and VR to be involved in immersive experiences already. You're working from home, but you rather work from a coffee shop. Or how about, let's just go sit in the conference. I can sit at a table in a virtual environment, see someone that I want to see talking up on stage, and I can do my work. I can pay attention to them when I want. I can focus on my work when I want, and I'm not disrupting. I'm not having to fly anywhere or go anywhere. It's not taking time out of my day to be at this event. Well, welcome to where immersive events are going to give me an in-person experience without all the hassle of going in person. But more so than a virtual event, where I'm basically just watching a 2D screen and I don't really get to interact. My goal is to interact. I can in an immersive event, whereas I can't do that nearly as well in a virtual event. So anyway, that's my rant for today. If you guys like this type of content, feel free to subscribe as we're posting a lot more on this channel. If you guys have questions about how to execute any of these types of events, feel free to reach out at Live Production Mastery. I'll drop my email in the description below. And with that, thanks for watching. Have a good one.
Well, I think I got the point across in both videos, but in the second one, obviously I talk much more about the future of events, which I'm more passionate about. So I'm gonna go with the second type of video where it's not fully scripted and not written by some AI. But hey, that's me right now. If I do need a very clean-cut video, then I'll probably just let AI do it. Let it do a clean-cut tutorial or video or something where the point is very specific. I'm not trying to rant or talk about ideas. I'm just trying to talk about how to do something very specifically, and it can probably produce a great video. There's so many AI tools I am testing right now, everything from ChatGPT, AI video automators that can produce videos for you, Descript, which can edit for you. So I'm really playing around with all these tools and just seeing what the innovation today is bringing. I'm so excited for it. and obviously the future has no limits. So yeah, I'm definitely ready, and we're in for a wild ride. Let's do it.